Abe Lincoln in 1839 in Springfield, Kentucky. They belonged to a group that supported the arts, political happenings, and their hometown. Mary Todd came from wealth and privilege, as Abe had little opportunity to learn growing up. She was drawn to his ability to listen and love for politics. Unlike a lot of men during this time, Abe viewed women as equals. Mary wasn't impressed by his looks at first, but was intrigued by his heart, his views on right and wrong, his ability to learn English and law, and the way he was with his words. They then wed in 1842. Abe and Mary became a team when it came to Lincoln becoming the next president of the United States. She liked to project her opinions about current events, and since women in the 1800s had little opportunity to work, she wanted to help Lincoln win the election. He would consult her with any decision he had to make, allowing them to come together. She wanted this for them. She would critique his speeches, raise awareness to the Republican Party, and entertain his companions. Abe started to travel a lot while Mary raised their 4 boys on their own. She adored her children and became attached, using them to protect her vulnerable side. Lincoln became president in 1860. Mary thought this was her time to be the first lady and center of attention. This was not the case. The Civil War broke out and Lincoln was extremely preoccupied with the war and had little time to focus on Mary and his family. Mary was looking for something that would fulfill her duties as First Lady. She would redecorate the White House and visit hospitals to ensure everything was running smoothly. She needed more tasks to fulfill herself. She soon became depressed when she lost several relatives at war and her son due to illness. She was in bed for weeks and canceled all social events. In 1865, she witnessed the assassination of her husband and could hardly hold herself together. She became a widow and dressed in black for the next 17 years after her husband's death. She then was sent to a mental asylum by her own son and never was the same. She never forgave him and moved back to Springfield to live out the last 2 years of her life.
Abraham Lincoln and Mary Todd Lincoln got married on November 4, 1842, until Abraham Lincoln was assassinated on April 15, 1865, with part of their marriage taking place during the Civil War. Marriage was common throughout this period, and many couples married fast due to their fiancés going off to war. Women during this time period typically did not work, so marrying and having kids was a normal thing for women to do. Balancing being a mother and being a wife was very important during this time as well, with being a mother as their first priority. There was a bit of an age gap in marriage. Women usually got married when they were in their early 20s, and men usually got married when they were in their early 30s. Abraham Lincoln was 33 years old and Mary Todd was 23 years old when they became married. Children during this time were sent to war, some as young as 13, who were given the task of being messengers, fighters, or drummers. Children who weren't sent off to war had to work extra hard in the house due to a father, uncle, or brother fighting in the war. These children had to help bring money to the family since family members were gone at war and financial income was typically low. There was a large amount of division amongst the people during this time era because of slavery. When Lincoln became president, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which caused a large gap between citizens in the South and citizens in the North. The South feared that by abolishing slavery, they would lack labor and financial means to afford their land and crops. Mary Todd Lincoln was highly disliked in the White House because she was emotional, outspoken, and spent a large amount of money during the Civil War when money was tight. Death was common throughout this period, specifically through dysentery. Dysentery spread very rapidly through both armies because of a lack of sanitation practices and contaminated water. Depression was common throughout this time period due to many mourning the loss of their loved ones in the war. Mary Todd Lincoln suffered greatly from all of the death that occurred in her family, from her children dying at oddly young ages to sitting next to her husband when he was shot, that she was admitted into an insane asylum. Some historians have doubted that she was actually insane, but in this time, men had a strong advantage over women in court hearings.
In the 19th century, relationships were transitioning from a focus on societal and economic status to that of relationships centered around love and personal choice. Sexually, women were described as passionless and unsexual, responsible for bearing children above pleasure. This was mainly due to increasing out-of-wedlock sexual practices and pregnancies, resulting in a reformation of women's purity and chastity, which led to a desexualization of women. Men were expected to be the only partner to show sexual desire in order to pursue a woman into a courtship. Men were expected to provide for the family and control the household, as well as legal matters. Many men toiled in the fields or ran a plantation in the American South. However, with industrialization on the rise, many men found work in factories. At the end of the 19th century, women also began to gain more societal freedom and were seen working in factories as well, providing a work balance in the household. Prostitution was also on the rise, particularly in Britain, and STDs began running rampant. Eventually, the Contagious Diseases Act of 1884 in Britain led to stricter regulations in brothels and among British soldiers. In the slave community, marriage was both encouraged and sometimes punished by slave owners. Southern law did not recognize slave marriages at this time. However, many slave owners still permitted their slaves to marry in order to reproduce and increase morale.
Abraham and Mary Todd were described to be opposites. Although in this time in society it was normal for the man to be in charge of his household, Mary Todd was seen to look after Abraham just as she did her own children. Lincoln seemed to be very dependent on Mary Todd and sought her advice and judgment on matters even as president. Another difference in their relationship was that Mary Todd was born into wealth and education, whereas Abraham was not very wealthy. There is some speculation to if either Abraham or Mary Todd married for love, but it was evident to many others that despite the hardships and temper of Mary Todd, that they both had a fondness of another, and it showed through the respect given to her by Abraham.